Welcome everybody. This is our last session for today, and we have a couple more tomorrow that we would invite you to take a look at. So I want to welcome you this afternoon. A couple housekeeping items. If you could, please make sure to type questions in the chat or use your mic. Rachel is perfectly welcoming of comments and questions as we go along. So that's helpful. But if you are not asking a question, we ask that you keep your mics muted. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Open Education Week webinar, and we are pleased to host Rachel Rigolino from SUNY New Paltz. Rachel is an instructor in the English department, and she'll be sharing about her experience using a Lumen open textbook to create online course modules. So I'll turn it over to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Erin. So I have been teaching in the SUNY New Paltz English department, since the early 90s. So quite a while. And my primary focus is on developmental writers. And those are writers who oftentimes English may not be their second or even third language. Some of them, though, are coming from backgrounds that were underprepared educationally. But then I also teach composition and writing courses across the board, and I teach upper division English lit classes as well. I'm kind of a utility infielder. So I use the Black Swan here because if you're familiar with Nassim Taleb's book, I think it was 2007, about the Black Swan kind of phenomenon, talking about unexpected things that happened. And many of us have used this as a metaphor because he sees the black swan, because they are unexpected, as disruptors, as things that are unpredictable that happen and disrupt the landscape. And I'm going to come back to this metaphor because I don't really know if it's totally appropriate for what happened in 2020, not only with, I would posit, online education, but also the shift to OER, or this kind of consensus that we should get behind OER educational artifacts. So in any case, I use the swan because it's what moved us in this particular instance to OER very, very suddenly. So a little bit of just definition, and I'm just bringing up the UNESCO symbol there. And then just to recap, I'm sure everyone knows, but educational resources that are openly available for both educators and students without an accompanying royalty or license fees. So that's the definition that I'm using. And the context. So, okay, fall 2020. At SUNY New Paltz, we of course shifted, as everyone else did, in the spring of 2020. We shifted online, or at least partly online. Many of our courses were actually hybrid. Composition 1. We offer a 2-semester sequence of writing for first-year students, Composition 1 and Writing and Rhetoric. So Composition 1 has many of our developmental writers in that course, because students can indeed test out and just go right into Writing and Rhetoric. Well, in any case, we were looking at 17 hybrid sections, and then 4 completely web sections, only 1 asynchronous and 3 synchronous. And I should put a little caveat there with the hybrid, because the hybrid, many instructors met maybe every other week, like once during the week, or some instructors met every third week, so it was very much going to be online, this shift to online instruction. Now, another piece of the puzzle for us was the fact that we have teaching assistants, and these are students who are grad students who are working towards their MAs. in our department, and many of them were first-time instructors, never been in a classroom. And then you say, well, most of your instruction is going to be online. 5 adjuncts, and I was the only full-time instructor. Now, our adjuncts, for the most part, were seasoned instructors. So we were faced with moving online. And I just want to give you the overall picture. I'm sure this is something that happened on all of your campuses also, but this really seismic shift to online education. I was sharing this the other day with my students, and I said, you know, this is really remarkable to me that we made this move. And actually, we made it, I would argue, pretty effectively um, and across the board. So are there any questions about the context? Okay.
Not so far.
So these were our questions. And when I say we, uh, it involved me because I'd been there so long, and I'm the only, there are 2 of us full-time instructors. It was the coordinator of the composition program, and I'm the coordinator of the developmental writing part of that. And so we were thinking about, you know, what can we do to help instructors? Many of them were coming into this, you know, imagine that you're coming in as your first or second semester as a grad student, and you've never taught. So how can we help them deliver online course instruction? And the second piece of that was the fact that we don't have a common textbook. Um, our adjuncts have a little more flexibility, and they can bring in textbooks that they like. But our TAs have a short list of 3 or 4 texts. But we had to operate under the assumption that everyone could be using a different book, or 3 people using one book and 4 people another. We also needed to create material, obviously, that aligned with our SLOs, our student learning outcomes. And then, of course, the fourth piece of the puzzle, especially for me, because I'm interested in accessibility, is a big thing for me. How can we bring in material that will be accessible? So these were all very big questions. And I set as my goal, it basically became my project because I'm the person, the kind of tech nerd in my department. So I knew that I was going to build this out on Blackboard, you know, our LMS. And I thought, okay, let's make these little mini lessons. And I worked with our OIT, our Office of Instructional Resource. Can I build this in such a way that will allow instructors to copy this master course into their own course shells with hopefully minimal effort, and things will go smoothly. So that was that. So obviously, okay, starting from scratch. And, you know, this was something, a project that kind of, you know, got going in May, and it had to be ready to be copied over in August, you know, end of May. And in addition to all of this, I'm teaching a little bit of a summer school course. The great thing I would say about composition courses and writing courses in general is that there's so much great OER material out there. I think that it's just maybe due to the fact that writing courses are very flexible in terms of their, you know, reading material. We don't necessarily have to deal with copyright, in that we can bring in things that are in the public domain, or perhaps coming in through library databases. We can be much more flexible, I think. I think also that compositionists as a group are very engaged and advocating for accessible material. And it's just part of, kind of our ethos. So there seems to be, to me, from what I've been able to see, that there are a lot of resources out there. So I knew I didn't have to start from scratch. Although I did have, of course, over, all these years of teaching a lot of my own material, I knew that there was a lot of stuff out there. So the steps in the process to creating this master course that was then copied over across sections, obviously I did request a master course site for our OIT staff. I needed to identify an OER text. I decided I'd like to start, if I could, with a textbook that was aligned to our SLOs. And then in terms of the mini lessons, I wanted to think, like, how many am I going to create? How many weeks are in the semester? What can I do in this amount of time? And then, of course, the actual creation of quizzes and short answer assignments, and then revising the text. So, this was all not linear at all. The first two things were more or less linear, boom, boom, and of course, as I revised the OER text, I revised the quizzes and everything, then became very, very much of a cyclical kind of process. So looking for a text, again, I knew we're going to use OER. We were not going to use a textbook or courseware from a publisher, because we wanted this to go out across sections, to be used as needed, as wanted. It had to be highly flexible. So I think all of us probably know David Wiley's the 5 R's, in terms of being able to reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. That was all essential. And so as someone who knows a little bit about tech stuff, I was like, okay, but I knew I had to have something that I could revise easily. And that's what sent me to, I'm trying to get, let me stop my next screen, to the Lumen, a Lumen title that I found. And Lumen is in a 3-year partnership with SUNY. I think it began in 2019. Am I correct about that? Is it 2019 that this started? Okay. So this partnership I'm right about that,
Yep,
right?
you are.
Okay. So this partnership with SUNY made it possible to really to go into that catalog and to select a text. And I knew it was going to be free for my students. And I guess there was a part of me that said, wow, if you really mess up, it was free. It didn't cost anyone anything. So I went in with a little bit of trepidation. The thing that what felt very good about in terms of the Lumen textbook, and then later on, I wound up adopting some courseware also, but was that they are accessible. That was another piece of the puzzle. For example, those of you who are creating artifacts to put up and share, accessibility is a big part of that. And I knew I did not have the time to have to worry about if a particular textbook page and the images had alt text, were things closed captioned. I wanted that piece just to be built in there and to be fine. And I saw that Lumen was accessible. So we went with them. And this is a textbook that I chose. At the time, it was on their Candela. That's the way they, I think, describe it, the Candela platform. I don't believe this particular textbook now. I think it's a Waymaker title, and we could talk about that later. But in any case, let me give you some example of just their sample chapters here. It's all very, basic composition-y chapters you would expect to see in any textbook. So any questions at all so far? No? Okay, so everything looked good. To me, this is lining up nicely with our goals for our Composition 1 course and our student learning outcomes. Now, this is what just sold me, again, on using Lumen, was that the fact that it resides on this Lumen platform on WordPress is WordPressy. I'm not enough of a tech person to describe exactly, but it is built out on a WordPress platform, and it's very, very easy to edit. I really had very little difficulty with adding material, with deleting something, adding something, putting in different media. It was all very easy. And I do want to give a very big, and I'm going to come back to this later, but a very big kind of shout out to the back end support that I received through this whole process from Lumen. It was absolutely first rate, and which surprised me. Again, I was going into this not expecting a whole lot from Lumen because this is quote unquote free. And their IT staff were wonderful. So anyway, so editing was not an issue. Now, in terms of the mini lessons, just to kind of give an overview, the mini lessons, we wanted them to account for 1 to 2 hours. So each module, and I began in the beginning, I called them modules, but then I changed it to mini lessons. But in any case, each one should take a student between 1 to 2 hours to complete. And we were trying to, get that to align with to help instructors when planning their course. Well, how many hours a week and how does that tie in to the New York State Education Department's demand for clock hours, right? Instructional hours. I wanted to select topics that would be covered by all of our instructors, but I wanted to build in a little bit of choice there. I wanted to make kind of maybe some extra modules. So there could be some choices. People could use this, but maybe they didn't use that. And then I did want to bring in obviously some online best practices. Quizzes. So yeah, I did build in quizzes. They did not come with the textbook. However, this particular textbook has now become a Waymaker courseware. They've taken the textbook and they have built in assessment, and they've built in practice exercises. But that wasn't there when and I didn't really want to go that route anyway. I wanted this to be kind of independent of that courseware, but just to say that Lumen does do that with that textbook now. So that I thought was very interesting. Anyway, so I built out quizzes on Blackboard, multiple choice, true, false. The quiz questions are given ahead of time. I randomized, made it so that the questions were randomized, no time limit. So it more or less was homework, but it gave it, called them quizzes. Students could take the quiz twice. And it covered the material that was in the unit. So here's an example of a quiz as it looks in my LMS, right? This would be the way it looked in the LMS. You'll see at the top, I had an answer key for the instructor that was, default hidden from the students. Students are given the quiz questions ahead of time. And then there's the link to take the quiz. The short answer assignments, I initially tried to use the blog feature, but it didn't copy well. So just, sometimes I don't know why, but it just didn't do well. So now I'm using the assignment tool, and students will upload writing assignments, about 250 words. Of course, an instructor has to read that. And you know, all of this is able to be edited by the instructor. The instructor does not have to deploy the quiz, for example. The instructor can change the writing prompt for the short answer. So all of this is reusable and revisable, of course, behind the Blackboard wall, paywall, you know, it's within our ecosystem, but the instructors could manipulate that. And this is what the master course looked like from the front welcome page. Keep in mind that this is a front welcome page for the instructor. The students don't see this. This is the instructor sees this. And I had to actually create short instructional videos to explain to the instructors how they could then deploy this in their course. And these are the folders that were available to instructors. You can see I didn't date anything because, you know, obviously as you bring it in, the instructor will date it themselves. I did put out the mini lesson objectives. They're not numbered, obviously, then the instructor would number them themselves. And I was very consistent in terms of the design of each mini lesson so that for students, every time they clicked inside one of these folders, it would be consistent. I think that's, you know, obviously very important for students to have a consistent design. The contents listed at the top. And then what was really neat about the Lumen text had different artifacts. Some things were, you know, an essay or just writing in the textbook. But oftentimes that particular composition one, they had their own videos. They linked out to things. So with multimedia for the most part, I think in each chapter. And then always at the bottom, there was a quiz and short answer. And this is probably more than you really want to know, but when it came into the instructor's site, if you look over there to your left, you'll see that the mini lessons were hidden and the students couldn't just pop right into them, but they were, that's the way it came into an instructor's site. And instructors could then from that, on the left hand there, link, they would deploy the mini lessons that they wanted. And there were some hiccups with the grade book. And one really important, incredibly nice thing that I was so amazed, and this may be hard to explain, but the Lumen backend support, I said to Lumen, look, in fact, let me go back. Okay, you see how these are all discrete objects, right? Defining critical thinking, that's a page in a textbook, page in a textbook, and then here's a video. These are all very discrete items. I wanted them to remain discrete. I did not want a student to click into critical thinking and then at the bottom of the page of that textbook say, oh, and click the go ahead arrow, because that might take them to a page that I wasn't even using, right? And I did not want them to get lost in the Lumen textbook. I wanted to isolate specific pages. And I thought, well, this is going to be what I could do. It's just put a warning, don't touch this button. And then, you know, that, yeah. So the Lumen OIT people, and I think her name was Carrie, she helped me to take away those buttons so they came in, I don't know, through the magic of LTI. I have no idea what she did, but she made it so that each page was a separate artifact. It was isolated and students couldn't just take off and go through the textbook. So that was a tremendous, tremendous thing for me. So I'm going to ask my own questions. This is what people usually ask me. So how much revising, how much remixing? I think when Carrie, when, where was it, Corey? Anyway, when we looked at the book, the original book, she said, I think you've changed about half of the book. Okay, by change, I don't mean that I just changed everything, but on a page, took out a paragraph, put in something new. I added, I have my own little YouTube Composition 1 channel, so I added some of my own stuff. But I would say I really worked with this book. I mean, think about it, for 8 weeks, and I changed anywhere, you know, between 40 to 50% of it. So it really was substantial amount of adding and a little bit of subtracting. But you know what was really cool about this? We were able to add material from our own comp program. And I know those of you that have worked with OER, you're like, oh, that's no big deal. But for us, this was our first try at this. And this I thought was great, to be able to bring in our own material into this platform. How much technical support that I need? I did need, obviously, the Lumen tech people on the back end, and my campus OIT staff. But it really was not tremendous. That WordPress site is pretty foolproof, pretty easy to edit. So I was very happy with that. Now, so how did I say, so what happened with this? Like, did it work? Did these mini lessons work? Did the Lumen material work? Well, I got, you know, in all of this, and I'm teaching, you know, 4 classes, I'm kind of at the anecdotal level to some extent. You know, I got a lot of positive feedback from instructors. I asked my own students and got some feedback. I felt very comfortable though, because I was using material that had been vetted by Lumen. And I also used some other clearinghouses like Merlot for some things. I used my own material, SUNY New Paltz. Everything was aligned with our SLOs. So I think an important next step with this project would be time, you know, take some time to develop some sort of useful assessment tool. I need to decide what questions I want to ask about this. If I just had 5 minutes to really think some more about it. But so far, everything was has been positive. Another question I get is, how much work goes into curating this? And I would say things have been somewhat, it's been sporadic. When the mini lessons were first deployed, there were some issues, but they really had to do not with the Lumen text or with what I created, but with this integration with the Blackboard gradebook feature. So that's like a side issue almost. As I saw problems, they were all my problems. There were things like a spelling error or the way I duplicated quiz questions by accident. So that was kind of on me. And throughout the semester, yeah, I had to fix those. Over winter break, I went back through to make sure that this material I had added, not Lumen, because they take care of their own material. They're constantly curating what they've put up. But when it came to the videos I had created or I'd linked to, I was responsible then for correcting them. But what was neat about that was that as long as I made the corrections, think about this, in the master course, it went out across all the other pages that all the other instructors were using. So that was really nice. So going back to this, you know, I've been involved with ed tech since 1999 when I started to teach online, but this was really my first foray into OER, the OER kind of revolution. And I'm going back to Nassim Taleb's Black Swan metaphor, because I'm not really sure it's completely unexpected, right? this shift to online is not, we can't say is a complete outlier. The same thing with OER. It's just an interesting metaphor to me, but it certainly was not unpredictable. The seismic shift to online was, but we've all been in, I've been doing this since 1999. This has just accelerated some things. And also the shift to OER, this pushback against textbook companies and courseware, but also just the idea that this kind of shift globally in thinking about educational artifacts and sharing and being generous and so forth. It's not unpredictable. So as much as I think we like to use the black swan, I'm not sure it's quite a total outlier. What's happened recently. And my final thoughts would be, it really is tremendous to now, I'm totally sold now on the OER initiatives, and I'm an OER lead on my campus at this point. The potential to build and customize, and it is tremendous. And that, I saw it, we saw it worked. We saw it really kind of not, I wouldn't go so far. I'm not going to go so far and say just save instruction for fall 2020, but it certainly helped, especially with our teaching assistants that had never taught before. It gave them a little bit of, built-in lessons. But I think this is even more revolutionary when we tie it to OEP. And this is something that I'm starting to get into. I think I've always been interested in authentic, assignments, but this pushes me more in that direction. This idea that we could invite our own students to contribute to this, to help create artifacts, contribute sample essays, instructional videos. It's almost endless what could be done here to revolutionize, that's too strong a word, but to break open our instruction. Now, I'm going to just say free, caveat about OER. No, because obviously human labor is involved. The front end labor, that may be a one-time thing, kind of what I did my 8 weeks. I think, it certainly was labor intensive, and I got a tiny stipend. I did it because I wanted to do it, obviously. But I think as we continue with this, we do need to think about the fact that, yes, the instructional materials themselves are free and open, right, to be reused, but there is back-end support and services that have to be in place. And we need the labor, that kind of labor to keep going with this, obviously on the technology end. And then I did have this was just a basic, handout. If someone, these are just like four great things to look at, just resources to get started. So I'll stop sharing and see. Does anyone have any questions about any of this?
Feel free to open up your mics and talk directly, or you can type in the chat. Rachel's slideshow will be posted in the resources also, so that you can get to those links and all of those materials. I really like your thoughts on incorporating students too going forward, Rachel, with having them engage in creating essays, videos, anything to just bring in that open pedagogy piece.
Yeah, I think that, we had already been doing that. We have a collection of student essays we publish each year, but I hadn't been thinking this way in a while. Right now, what I decided to do, because of some of what we're doing with this, my students are creating reports about how SUNY New Paltz responded to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And, this kind of very real, authentic writing, authentic assignments that, again, composition is one of those programs or one of those courses that can be so open to this kind of these kind of assignments. I know it's not appropriate for everybody, but
No, I'm even thinking of this morning, we, I think our presenter shared the thematic reading anthology, another book at Lumen. And so it'd be interesting too to see student contributions to something like that because it's organized thematically, right? So those types of things just kind of get me energized as another fellow English person. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? So let's see, this may have already been covered, but this is from Tyler. Has anyone at New Paltz used this product in an on-campus class? He's interested in the difference between how this might play out in an online versus an on-campus class.
well, actually, this is interesting that you say that because the composition courses, oh my goodness, we were some of the few courses that were hybrid. So we would have at least one on-class session, in class on the ground. And I think that was because obviously we wanted our first years on campus for retention. We really wanted them on the ground. And so I'm just going to say I was very dubious about this, the whole thing. We did an excellent job. And I'm just a shout out to the SUNY New Paltz residential staff and professionals. They did a great job at that. So this has been used in hybrid. I would have no issue using this with an in-person class. It might be used slightly differently, but yeah, all the modules obviously were asynchronous. So I'd be interested to know, has anyone here, like in math, has anyone used any of the Lumen math titles? I'm assuming the math titles are just as kind of adaptable, right? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone on the call is using those or is actually a math person. We did have a couple math people last time, the 12 o'clock. We talked about math a little bit.
Oh, math is the largest adoption. Oh,
That's great.
that is good.
Mike, is that also because we have things like OHM, right? We have the online homework manager, which really has a really robust math capabilities.
Yeah, and I think if you can hear me okay, switch headsets, my apologies. Math faculty nationally have really been leading OER efforts since like the late 1990s, early 2000s. So they were early into the OER game. And then as math homework platforms, which math faculty also turned to quickly, but proprietary open licensed, they turned to open math platforms as well. So there's really a built up ecosystem of mathness in OER. Which we also see into
Mathness. I like that. Yeah.
So math that was the original champions there, huh?
Yeah, and I'm recalling too, I think forgetting the acronym, American Association of Math Instructors actually produces its own OER math content. So it's widely recognized in the discipline, which is another benefit for math faculty.
Okay. Well, that's great. I think there's a lot of opportunity there too for student engagement with, creating math questions and sample problem sets and all kinds of things like that as well. Wonderful. All right. Well, I just want to make sure we open the floor if anybody else has thoughts or comments. Oh, there we go. Mike is putting some, oh, there it is, math. Thank you. If you want to check that out further, or if you're a math person or a math person, you could even pass it along.
And so what year, so this particular agreement with Lumen started in 2019 and it'll expire when exactly?
That's a great question, Rachel. So it's a 3-year agreement. So the current agreement sunsets in June of 2022. SUNY is already in conversations in what a next agreement, if there is a next agreement, would look like. We certainly appreciate feedback from faculty like you and very frank comments in terms of the support we receive and quality of content as we review what the future looks like.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And yes, that was a horrible phrasing of tenses to the English faculty as we review what the future looks like. So I recognize that.
It's fine.
And all of the Lumen resources that you may have seen in different sessions this week, you can, you are SUNY faculty and your students can use those materials. They're free to use. Remix, revise.
Right.
We talked a little bit about just adopting the materials or adapting them, to really.
Well,
and I like what you said about that with like the specific pages of the text that you wanted, right? That's a great way to do that.
Well, I was going to say, though, I did see on the Lumen site that most people don't do this degree of remixing, revising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That most people will adopt it and not go to these extremes, and there may be, and I can understand that also. I think what initially, the reason I wasn't terribly interested in OER years ago, I didn't see the quality that was there that seems to be there now, much more so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do have some people who are, they'll point to, instead of just sending students to the entire text, right, they'll point to specific chapters and you can take that direct link and put it right into your course that way. So, but I think with you took it a step further and you said, I just want this page or these pages, right? So you just want that material.
Yeah, and I was surprised that they were able to do that for me so effectively. Really was very nice of them to do that.
That's great. All right, well, I'm going to put some links in the chat here. So folks have a way to access the recording. That's the first link here. And that'll get you all the recordings for the week, as well as the resources that have been shared in each session. And then this link here will take you to the survey. We have just a couple questions to help us with our future programming for Open Ed Week and any other webinars you might be interested in. There's also a section on that survey I should mention. If you have something that you would love to share in a presentation, we host outside of Open Education Week as well. So we host monthly webinars from our SUNY community on topics that you have expertise in. So we would invite you to submit something there and we can work that out with you. So I just appreciate Rachel sharing your experience through this whole process, the highs and the lows and the real candor about here's where it got tough and here's where I had to rethink this. And so that's wonderful for us, who might be getting our feet wet with all of this.
Great, and I enjoyed it. And as I say, I look forward to tinkering with stuff actually this summer to do more of it.
Right, that's when we'll hopefully have a little bit of time, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, thank you all for attending today. This is the last session, so after this one, we will be closing out the Zoom room. So we appreciate that.